right, class, we are going to finish up the second half of our mixed media galaxy. And I'm going to mix up some black watercolor. And if you don't have just black watercolor, then you can take a dark brown, which this is burnt umber. So you can see that it's a really dark brown. And then you're going to mix in this really dark blue. It's a bright blue, actually. It's ultramarine blue. So this is the color of this blue, just so you can see that. And I'm going to take some of the dark brown into the middle of the palette. Then I'm going to rake off anything I don't need. And then I'm going to mix up pick up some of the blue, just kind of soak up my brush. Then I'm going to mix those two together to make this nice black. So that's what I'm going to use to come in from the corners. And then I'm going to soften the center part to show you how to create these striations that we did, the wet into wet with a little bit of salt and different things into a galaxy painting. So here we go. We're going to just fill in some of the area that we want to be black. It's not like, you're trying to cover up everything. You just kind of want to have some of the sky coming through. And I'm not going to go all the way around first off because we need to soften edges. Now you don't want these hard lines. You don't see that in the sky. So I have wiped off the paint from my brush and I'm going to wet my brush, but then you don't want anything drippy, like it's really wet. So I'm going to roll my brush to where it's just damp, and you can actually just push against the end, and that way it's only damp at the tip. So you can get that type effect. And you're just going to touch the edges of your watercolor paint and soften some of these edges. And you want some of these colors to show through because most galaxies have colors. You can choose any of the colors that you want. I did one with, yellow and green galaxy. I did one with a red and purple galaxy, so it was like really dark, but it turned out really awesome. So play around with this as much as you'd like, and we're going to soften these edges of our galaxy so we don't have hard sky showing through, and you're just coming across the paper or the edge of that color that you put down and blending that out. You can always add more color if an area is getting too light for it to be, kind of the outer space around this galaxy forming here. And so feel free to add more color, deeper colors, and so that you can get this really outer space is like, so black, right? So we're going to do a little bit more, and then we're going to add softening. We're softening. I did this first Galaxy Colors, with that little Crayola set. The Crayola set that I had, all the black was gone. So that's why I'm having to show you guys how to do this. So if you have a set that has the black, then feel free to just use that. You just want to add a little bit of water. You want the paint to be pretty thick because otherwise you're going to end up with a gray outer space area. And as a matter of fact, I think this is too blue, so I'm going to grab some more brown. And if you're actually having to mix it, then mix up a whole bunch. You'd rather have too much than have to go back and mix and possibly have a different color. But in this particular painting, it's not going to matter as much as if you were doing, something else. So we're going to come in, and this is dry brushing when you can see the paper through any particular area. That means you don't have enough water for it to flow. Once again, I should have cleaned off my brush. Always clean off your brush and then go to the water. Otherwise, you'll just turn your water really dark, really dirty, really fast. And since we're just using clean water next to our shapes here, you don't want it to be all gray because the water is dirty. So a lot of times when I'm doing watercolors, I'll actually have two water bowls, one to clean off my brush in and then one to grab fresh clean water to lay down on the paper. But this particular project, we don't really need it that much. So I'm just going to flood that area. And I'm just kind of creating the blackness of outer space with our nebula or whatever this is, whatever it's called, with that. So I'm having to mix up some more black. Sorry about that. And so I'm going to darken some area in here, possibly a little line there. And you play around with this until you get your galaxy looking the way you want it to. So even if you get this whole page soaking wet and you're not happy with it, let it dry. Let it completely dry, and then you can come back and make anything darker. Because watercolor dries 30% lighter. So just know that it's not going to be this black whenever it's dry. Excuse me. Talking and painting. Difficult. Okay, so I'll put some of these black lines in here. And if you want to do like the cloud liftoff type where you're lifting out some of the whites and stuff like that, or lifting off some of this black and showing some gray, then you would do that with a tissue and paper towel, or you can even use your really clean and clean water brush. So I'm just wanting some of this to be darker in some areas because it's drying already and it's starting to turn kind of a dark blue, kind of a grayed blue, and so the paint wasn't thick enough. And so I need to get really thick paint. That means you're hardly putting any water in the palette itself. And so I think I'll make that one bigger. It's kind of, leading your eye in. And then I'm going to soften the edge just by running clean water next to it. Like this. All sides. And this is where I was talking about if you wanted a little bit of that bright blue to show up, here's a little bit of a tissue, and you can literally lift out the color that's there. You can also take your brush. My water's a little bit dirty, but I can put just a little bit of clean water in there and then lift it out. But you want to make sure that that spot on your towel is clean. Now I picked up all of that, but that way you can have a variation of color within your galaxy. So I want you to play around with it. Have fun. This is a fun class to have, like all of these different elements, all these different mediums. Now you can see as this is drying, it's turning into this dark, dark, dark blue. So I may just go to my other palette that has a true black. But if your set of watercolors at home doesn't have a black, I wanted you to be able to see how to fix that. And I think adding some different layers and stuff like that also kind of creates a fun effect. So and you see my hand going off onto the side. Once I've softened, I always go and touch my towel back so it takes off any color before I go into the water. Especially so that I don't just blacken up, dirty up my water real quick. I might take a little of that out. Now this is just a damp brush, not completely wet. Okay, so once you're happy with your galaxy shape and stuff, which I'm okay with it, I think this is too bright, maybe, and so I'm going to tone that down. So I'm just going to make up a little bit more here of this black. And remove that out so it can look more like the little clouds of a nebula or something, you know. And I'm going to lift out an area there with my tissue. Kind of gives it that cloud shape. Go along here. I know that this is a hard line, but I kind of like it. I'll just soften it a hair. Sometimes you have to look at it from different angles as well to see if you like any of the colors that are happening. I think this line is too strong going through, so it's just like not a cloud type shape at all. So I'm gonna add some bumps and lumps to it to kind of make it look more like a cloud shape. So it doesn't have just a straight line like that. And I may need to do the same thing with this one. It's very much a straight line. So I'm going to bump up and down and create a more of a cloud type shape. Blacken in these corners a little better. Come into it a little bit here and there. Whoops. Yeah, I'm not so sure I like that where it touches. So I'm going to probably take that out. Turn to a clean part of my towel. Move around some of that purple color. And some of that cloud can actually be white. Oops. Have so little water that the brush was staying bent. So you do need enough water to keep your brush from bending over. My table is wiggling just a little bit, making that knocking sound. Just making some more cloud type shapes. I don't want it to be very linear whatsoever. So we can just come in and lift out any color. If you still have the colors mixed up from day one, you could actually drop a little bit of color into these sections, you know, while they're still wet from you having just lifted out. So you can just soften in some color into those sections as well. And you don't think you have enough of certain color, or whatever you want a color to be a little more dominant, then you can feel free to do that. And you're just going to soften those edges as well. Kind of blend it in. This whole painting is kind of about learning how to soften edges. And how to blend out blacks. And just kind of play around with it until you get it the way you want it. And then we're going to blow this dry and add our stars, and your galaxy is going to be finished. So add all your blacks. I'm kind of going in this diagonal type motion, so I could break that up by bringing some black down or bringing some white up, but I'm just going to go ahead and blow this dry, and I'll be right back. All right, class, we're back with our galaxy. And I have a little bit of white acrylic paint and old toothbrush that you can see I've used like a gazillion times. It doesn't matter the style of it. I've had a bunch of people ask me if it's jig-jaggy or if it's got those little plasticky parts. I've used pretty much all the different varieties and they all work. So what I'm doing now is I'm just wetting the toothbrush, so it's pretty wet. So I need to dab off a little bit, and then I'm just going to touch just the tip into the water, just a little bit, so I can make it move around with my acrylic paint. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of the acrylic paint, and I'm going to rub it into this little foam plate. You can use a plastic plate as long as you wash off the acrylic paint, you know, before you put it in your dishwasher. But you can just, while this is still wet, you can just rinse right off any acrylic that you have. I've also got on an apron, so because this is going to make tiny little bitty splatters, and so I want to make sure that, you know, it doesn't get on my clothes. And I'm going to drag my finger back. Now you can hold it with one hand and drag it back like this, or you can do it in you know, two-handed. So this is going to create all the little stars in our galaxy, and you just have to keep going back, getting a little bit more. Try not to get too much water, or they're all going to be really pale colors. And this is kind of what makes your galaxy really come alive. Now, these first set are a little bit graying as they dry onto that wet surface. So now I didn't go back to the water, and I'm getting just fresh paint. So these are going to be stars that are actually closer to us. See how thick it is on there this time? And you definitely want to make sure you have on an apron, an old t-shirt that you don't care if something happens to it, and you're just going to put in your stars. If you want, at the end, I clean my finger there, to make some like radiating stars or whatever, then you can take the tip of your brush. Now this is kind of a big watercolor brush. So I'm going to grab a smaller acrylic brush really fast. You do want a round brush. So this would be a round brush. It's kind of fuzzy. So this one is round as well. That's the same fuzzy one. See all my toothbrushes? I have tested all these different ones with the different shapes to them and stuff. And anyways, they all tend to work pretty well. And you can get just a little bit of the acrylic paint just in the tip end. Don't smash your paint all in there. And every once in a while, you know, like right on the edge somewhere in your galaxy, there is a shining star. Another way to do this is with a gel pen. I've done that with a gel pen before, and you're just kind of making a crisscross shape, and it could be longer top and bottom, or it can be longer on the sides. So like if you wanted it to go out, just kind of a twinkle. Hopefully you can see that. And I wouldn't make a ton of those, but you can make a few in different areas. And I like to make a few. And you just want enough paint in the very tip end of your brush. Hopefully you can see there's a little ball of paint just on the tip end of my brush, right? And you're just going to drag that through. And this is going to be the big one. Like right on. And if you get this too big and you don't like it, you could, water is your eraser in acrylic. And so you can come up and take that color and push it back away, so that it doesn't look as fat, the lines of it. So make you 2 or 3. I wouldn't make a whole bunch of them, and they can be all different sizes. And it just kind of is a fun little thing to add to your painting, to have these little galaxy stars. going on. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I can't wait to see your pictures of your galaxies. Guys, when y'all do these projects, I love to see them. They're so fun. I'm going to go ahead and take this off just so you can see how when we did the painting, make sure as you pull this that you're pulling away from the painting. Don't just grab it and jerk, or you could tear your entire painting. I've seen that happen. So pull away from the painting there, and there's your galaxy. I hope you had a great time with this project. I'll see you in the comments.